Okay, another day, another FPL pod. Jack, how are we?
Josh, really good. Yeah, really good. Thanks. Excited to do another one of these kind of mini quick videos. What are we talking about here?
So we're looking at price changes, so price rises and price falls. What's the deal? Is it just a gimmick, or does it have real value? Can you use it to build a team that performs well? That's the big question.
Yeah, it's just team value. How important is it? Is it important? Should you ignore it? What's it useful for? What does it all mean? So that's the key question. Is team value important to your FPL team? And we'll explore what the data kind of says, what the various philosophies are behind it, and kind of hopefully come to some kind of conclusion, won't we, as to whether you should worry about team value at any point during the season while you're playing FPL. So it's one of those core questions, isn't it? So yeah, should be good. Should be hopefully useful for people.
And us, selfishly.
And us, yeah, we might find it useful. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? We don't know. So Josh, before we get into the kind of theories, I guess, do you want to quickly explain how your team builds value and how the price changes work? Most people know, but just a quick summary of how it works in the game.
Sure. So the price rises and falls work mainly through the transfers in and out. So they're triggered by managers bringing in players or taking players out. And if they do so in volume, they can cause a player's price to rise by 0.1 within a given day, up to 3 times a week. They've got those 3 windows in the week. So, and then in terms of when people talk about team value and being able to cash in on that, if you only actually earn 0.1 for every 0.2 that a player rises. So that's where people talk about, so and so is doing really well, but maybe coming up to a bad patch of fixtures or something. Time to ship them out. You're only going to get 0.1 for every of the 0.2 that they've gained since you've owned them.
That's right. Yeah. So if you own Salah and a lot of people are buying him, then he might go up, say he's 13 million, he'll go up to 13.1. You'll only be able to sell him from your team for 13 million until he goes to 13.2, at which point you can sell him for 13.1. And conversely, if a player drops 0.1, so Salah dropped to 12.9, you'd only be able to sell him for 12.9. So it doesn't work both ways, does it? The doubling. And they've done that. Quite a lot of people don't like that because you can end up with a lot of value locked in a player. A lot of people say, don't they? They're like, oh, I don't want to sell Salah if he's 14 million because I can only sell him for 13.5. And so I won't be able to get him back in again. So that's an interesting point we can chat a little bit about later. Yeah, but your overall team value that you see on your profile page is the sum of all the value of your players that have gone up and down at that point. So most people end up at kind of 102 million, 103 million. That's the kind of where the season ends up on. But the golden question is, how is that important? Is it important to worry if you've got 99 million value, less than the initial 100, or should you be loving it if you've got 105 million value? And it is like a mystery, isn't it? It's one of the opaque parts of the game is what determines whether prices rise or fall. There are a few websites that will predict it, but they don't actually release the algorithm, as you say. So it's an interesting one. So that's how value works, Josh. Before we did this video, a priori, how do you typically treat team value? Do you worry about it? Do you care? Do you love it?
Typically, I haven't really cared that much about it. Like, I've always been aware of it and thought, that look at it from time to time during the season, but I don't put much stake in it personally. I don't use it really that much when considering bringing players in or strategizing to take players out, or I don't try to raise the team value and cash in on it. I think that's such a big brain, or big move. It takes so much kind of planning and relies on so much almost luck for managers to, bring in players or take them out according to what plan you're coming up with. So I don't put much stake in it at all, really. But that's why I've been really interested in what we can find and summarize here as to maybe I should be looking at it. So that's where I'm standing from. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I think I've looked in recent seasons, I've cared about it a bit more. And been a bit more aware of it purely because of the kind of meta game of when you wild card in the kind of game week 33, 34. Because that's essentially when the value matters, is when you cash in the players. When you sell is when the value matters. Like value of Salah, if you own Salah, the value of Salah doesn't matter if you're never going to sell it. And I guess you're only interested if he goes up in price because you know it's blocking out other players from buying him. So I guess it becomes more valuable in that way. But I'm kind of like you, like team value. I don't play the game of, it looks like Kane's going to rise 0.1 overnight. I better transfer him in now. Say it's the Monday, transfer him in now so I can get that 0.1, even though I've got to wait till Saturday. So I don't play that game of prioritizing value over information. I only do that if I can't afford him if he goes up that 0.1. So yeah, I think we're quite similar, aren't we? We're kind of like, we respect it, but it doesn't influence our gameplay. But it does influence a lot of other people view it as much more valuable, especially early season. You hear people, all they care about is building that early team value in the first 10 game weeks so they can be ahead of the game when it comes to later on. So that made me think. So the first thing I looked at was, right, the current team of the season. So we're recording this. It's the international break, game week 8 of the 22-23 season. And they obviously do that team of the season so far on FPL. So you click the little star and you can see it. So I was curious to see how valuable that team of the season is so far, and whether you could afford it on a budget of 100 million, because in theory, all of these players are going to be going up in price. So team value would be really important if you couldn't afford this amazing team of the players that are performing. So you've got you can read them out, Josh. My throat's hurting a bit. You read out the team of the season and their prices, and then the overall price down there.
So yeah, I mean, Pope in goal at 5.2 mil. Saliba 4.9, very popular at the moment, very popular. Cancelo, obviously everyone knows Cancelo, 7.2. Trippier coming in at 5.4. KDB 12.3, one of the big dogs. And then we've got Gross, 6 million, having a great season so far. Rashford at 6.6 mil. McAllister making it the Brighton pair in midfield at 5.6. Haaland, and then at 12 million. And then Kane at 11.4 and Tony at 7.2.
There you go. Yeah. And so the total of those guys, so that's obviously an 11. So you need the 15 players, but that's 83.8 million is the team of the season. So if you started the game now, if you created an account now, you could afford this team with a bench of 4.0s and a couple of 4.1s. So I thought that was quite interesting. So if you were 8 game weeks late to the party, or if you wildcarded now and only had 100 million, you could afford the best team so far. So I thought that was interesting. And even though we're fairly early on in the season still, it'll be interesting to see how that fares, because anecdotally, I feel like there's always the McAllister of the season, or the Saliba, who are the really cheap super performers of the season that everyone gets eventually, but make it really affordable. Like what I should have done is worked out how much this team would have cost in game week 1. Quite a lot less, because all those 0.6s and 0.2s and 0.4s are the price rises of these players. So yeah, so it'd be much, much cheaper than 100 million. So if you're worrying so immediately my reaction is, if you really are pushing to get 103, 104 million, maybe don't worry about it, because you can still afford this amazing team at 100 million. Don't know, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of proves, as you said, in the cold light of day that it's not going to run away from you. And that's even after like kind of 8 game weeks. The values aren't going to run away from you so much. And I know a lot of people play close to the wire and they're thinking transfer I'm going to make next week, it's 0.1 or 0.2 in the 2 players they want to bring in, and therefore it gets really tight with the transfers. But when you take a step back, I think that shows, doesn't it, that it is achievable. And I guess the other thing I would say is you touched upon it there, is that that's the best team over 8 game weeks, but we know that there are players that have smaller pockets of form, like Son in the last game week, for example, came in with a hattie despite doing pretty much nothing for the rest of the game weeks. That if you deviate from these for small pockets of time, then you can maximize your points anyway. So I think, it's not backing up the fact that you need to be scared of it or maybe give so much attention to it.
No, that's the thing. And conversely, I thought I'd also look at the manager in FPL with the highest team value so far this season. So this is a guy who you'd assume is prioritizing value over anything else. So looking at Ozzy, our friend Ozzy, his team value is worth, I didn't write it down, that was stupid. So his team value is worth 104.4 million already after 8 game weeks. So he spent 60 points in transfers. I'm looking at his history now. Spent 60 points, so that's 15 points hits, I guess, if that's how much it's cost, right? Have I done the maths right there? Yeah, 15. So he's hitting hard. He's presumably looking to build the most expensive team he can get. And have you seen his rank, Josh? Have I spoiled his rank for you?
I haven't. I want to see it. I have seen it.
So his rank is 7.8 million out of 10 million. So it's pathetic. It's rubbish. So this shows in a one isolated spot that if you just focus on team value at the expense of everything else, it's not the way to go if you want to do well at FPL. And I remember they don't do it anymore, but they used to. On the homepage of FPL, they've got the most successful leagues in terms of points. And they do have most valuable teams, but they used to have most valuable leagues. And they were always things like the money league, big cash money, loving cash league and stuff. And it was just they were playing a meta game of who can build the most value, like ignoring points. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So it's like when you play anti-FPL, some people play just for the value, which is fair enough. There are no rules. But just how abysmal his rank is, and looking at the other most valuable teams, their ranks are also terrible in the high millions. So there it is. So far, Josh, our this intel tells me that it's not a big deal, team value. It's really not.
And that's 2 biggies, isn't it? As I said, team of the season so far, affordable as of now if you stepped in.
Yeah.
And that highest value manager or highest value team, the manager of which is 7.8 mil. Like, I would never have guessed that far down, if you know what I mean. Like, I would have thought, okay, maybe if they're playing that meta game, they would be a bit further down because they're just chasing that and not really taking in points. But that's very low down.
Yeah. So interesting. So I mean, there are 2 sides to this though, where there's one on the one hand, it's building value. So maybe we've decided that actually worrying about building value to the 104 million isn't that important. But the flip side is the losing value. So if you lose value, it means your players are dropping in price. And maybe it isn't that important to gain value, but if you lose value and your squad's worth 98, 97 mil, then you can't afford that. Suddenly you can't afford that team of the season. It's probably a bad sign that you've got players that are dropping in price. So I found an article on Fantasy Football Hub. It was a couple of years old, but it had this quite nice quote. And I wanted to see what you made of it, Josh. So the quote is, there are roughly twice as many price falls versus rises over the season. But in the early stages, it's almost a 4-to-1 ratio of falls to rises. So in like the first 10 game weeks, far more players fall in price than rise in price. And that kind of makes sense because if there's one player who everyone wants to bring in, say Salah, he can only rise 0.3 in a week. Say 1 million people transfer him in, but that 1 million people might sell a pool of 15 players to get him. So those 15 players can all drop 0.1 for every Salah rising 0.1. So it makes perfect sense. It also then it says the key takeaway from this is to get off falling players before they drop by using price prediction sites and ideally move them to players who are rising. Really focus on this from game week 2 through to game week 12. So that's saying worry about price drops, not price rises. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, from the perspective of not getting priced out of assets that you want to get, that makes complete sense. And the logic, as you said, behind why there's more price falls, and it's because start of the season, we're kind of picking at information from pre-season or previous seasons, which really isn't that reliable going into the Premier League season. So people are picking players all over the place with no real idea how they're going to play, and then you all gravitate towards the players that pop off in the first 2 or 3 game weeks or whatever. So that makes complete sense. But yeah, I don't know whether I'd say definitely gravitate towards the ones that are rising. Like if your ones are falling, great, get off them. But like we do know there is value in looking at differentials, especially maybe, sticking mainly template, but there are pockets of players in your teams that you can take a little bit more risk, and you don't have to go for the players that are rising potentially. And these coming full circle back to the point that the whole reason why these players are rising or falling is because managers are deciding to get them out. It's it's the people, that it's not the performance. I know they're linked. Like if players perform well, then the people are bringing them in, but it is the players at the end of the day. So sometimes it's good to go against the grain and be a bit more risky. We know that's the case as well.
Yeah, tricky. I guess it's cart before the horse in saying avoid price drops if you can, because like you say, there's a reason they're dropping, and you have to use your judgment of whether that reason is they're shit, they're playing rubbish, and you need to get rid of them, or people are knee jerking and you think people have misjudged this player. So I mean, I use those price prediction sites as a fact-finding thing, really, because if it shows you the top 10 players that are going to rise tomorrow, there might be a player in there that I haven't thought of or haven't looked at, so it flags them to me and thinks, oh, why is Pascal Gross rising? How's he been doing? Oh my God, he's been killing it. Oh yeah, he's in my thoughts now. Or what? Trent's dropping in price. Why? What's going on? Oh, he's injured. Oh. So it's like a news flagging device rather than, oh, I'm worried the price is going to rise or drop. You know what I mean? But it is a rubbish feeling when players you own fall in price, isn't it? It's just like a knock. And when you check the price rises in the morning, it just feels great when you own players that have risen in price. It just is a nice feeling in and of itself, I think. It's like a validation, isn't it, that you're doing well?
I guess though, not knowing the formula again behind this or the algorithm, we don't really know. We can never say like how much of a price rise is down to like knee jerkers, for example. So like one I think which is close to rise right now at the moment is Isak or Isaac, isn't he? Like, and really he's done all right, but there's so many unknowns with that transfer, him coming in. Like, yeah,
pen merchant.
Exactly. Come
but
on.
Yeah, there is.
I mean, I think that's an example of almost like a mini knee jerk. Okay, yeah, he's done okay. Newcastle looking all right, but it's not a guaranteed like success story, is it? If you bring him in, so yeah, I think it just doesn't tell the whole story, basically.
No, there are many reasons why a player can be brought in en masse or sold en masse, isn't there? And so it's up to you to like I say, it's like a flag. It should flag to you and say, okay, loads of people are selling Trent now. Is that just because he's blanked twice in a row, or is it because he's injured, or have Liverpool got a game? Oh no, they haven't. So yeah. What's your thoughts on that whole thing of if you've got a lot invested in a player, say you own Salah, he's gone up to 13.5 million, you can only sell him for 13.2. Does that ever stop you selling a player? If you've got value tied up in them, as they say?
Not really. I think I'm trying to think of scenarios where I want to get out a player who's risen so high to the point where they've got that much value in them. And then in the short term also want to bring them back in. Like,
exactly.
You would just hold them and look to get those points elsewhere in your team. It's like if we look at now, Haaland's worth 12 million now. He's gone up 0.5 million. It's insane. His ownership is crazy. Even if you're like, well, he's perhaps going to rotate him out for 2 weeks because the Champions League or whatever, and get him out. Like, that's just madness. It's I can't think of a scenario
of the price loss.
Yeah, I can't think of a scenario where it would work. And even if you are in a situation for your own team where you're going to do that, then that, the all the other managers, you're probably doing it because you're maybe doing so poorly in the season that you need to do something different. And in that case, then yeah, you probably want to go differential and probably won't bring them in the short term as well, because you need to do something different from everyone else to improve your overall rank. So yeah, I wouldn't pay it that much attention at all. Can you give me a reason why I'm talking rubbish?
No, you took the words out of my mouth, in that it's only relevant in that very, very rare niche time when you're taking the player out with the view to bringing him back in 3 weeks, which, I mean, it's impossible to plan transfers that far ahead anyway, I think, because of how much changes in the games. So if KDB's risen by 1 million and you own him, I mean, that rise is only useful to you in the one way of fewer people can afford to bring him in. So that's good, but that's separate to your team. And that profit's only useful to you if you sell him and spend that 0.5 million profit on someone else. So yeah, and you're right. When are you going to have a time when you take KDB out with the view to bringing him in 4 weeks' time? Like, it is strange. It is strange. I don't think, you're right. I never think about it either. I never think about, I can't bring him, unless, but if you're free hitting, you get him back anyway the next week. So yeah, I think that's a red herring feeling. And that's like a psychological thing of, I've got all this value and then this value's tied up, I can't sell. Well, he may as well have never risen in price if you're never going to sell him. So yeah, irrelevant, interesting one. And I've just, there was another quote I found on Reddit actually that kind of echoed the point of that Hub article, that says that summed it up quite nice. It says, sadly, the players who are doing well all rise, so sometimes you won't be able to afford them regardless. I feel like it's more about not falling behind than making a profit. And doing this research, that seems to be where I was landing as well. It's like increasing value there isn't much value, ironically, in going for increased team value, but falling behind in value is more of a thing to worry about, because A, it probably means the players you own aren't doing well at all. And B, when you do come to wildcard or free hit, you will have less of a budget to maybe even get that superstar team that we just looked at, that even though it was cheap, was still 100 million. So yeah, that was it. That kind of sums up the research side of it, really, Josh. So what's going on? Team value, what are your final thoughts, good or bad?
Well, the only real kind of take-home message I could pull out of that is use the prediction sites to avoid drops. I think that's one of the big ones, isn't it? Because inherently you will want to get those players out anyway. One of the whole reasons why they're dropping, and maybe dropping multiple times, is because they're doing terribly. They've got poor form, or they're injured, or whatever. And those are reasons why you want to get off them. Price rises almost is like a luxury problem, isn't it? Like, if you own a player that's rising, it's because they're doing well. So I don't really consider that side at all. So the big take home for me is, keep your finger on the pulse for the drops, get ahead of that from a decision-making perspective. because that could price you out of bringing in assets that you really, making positive moves from that perspective. Getting rid of players that are rising, it feels like a negative move, really.
Yeah. I think I'd be a bit stronger and go further and say price, it's not important. Team value is not important. And I think all it does is serve to show that you've done well up till now, because the players you own have gone up in price because they've done well and people have bought them. It's not to say, it's no indication of future returns, apart from the fact that you've got the good players. So it's not going to give you any real value, because when you wildcard or free hit, you'll want to bring in the good players anyway, who have all gone up in price anyway, probably. So, in the very, very rare occasions where you free hit when only Crystal Palace have got a game and you can afford their best players because your Haaland is worth 0.5 more than someone else's Haaland, that's a very, very rare niche scenario that doesn't warrant worrying about building team value, because it just never happens in the season, really. So yeah, I think my final thought is just don't worry about team value and only use the price rises as a flag, like I said, to say, oh, that player's rising in price. Why are people buying him? Oh, he has done well. Yeah, I'll think about him. Or conversely, that player's dropping in price. Why is that? I've got him. Oh, he's injured. Oh, he's this. It's like a news flag more than any other value. So that's where I would sell.
That's a shout. Yeah, give you some focus, which is always useful when you're looking at the next 2 game weeks. You're thinking, well, where the hell am I looking in terms of players?
What am I doing? Yeah, it's so hard to track of every player, isn't it? Like, especially with the Nottingham Forest, I don't know who their players are. I don't have a clue. But if I see Neco Williams rising, I'm like, he's had loads of chances. Yeah, fine. Or
let the other managers do the work. That's what we say.
Yeah, let the markets flag the hot players to you. Yeah. So if your team value is low at the moment, don't sweat it. Don't worry Don't worry about having to jump on price rises to build it up. Use it as just an indication of how well you're doing. And as we've seen, just because a team's got a high value doesn't mean they're any good. This guy's shit. Aussie's rubbish. So
yeah. That's been a massive take home for me.
Yeah, weird.
7.8 mil. Geez.
It just shows that you haven't even necessarily done that well if you've got a high value. So there it is. I think that wraps it up, Josh. Quick one.
Good. One less thing to worry about. I love it.
Yeah. Simplify the game even more. Good. All right. Well, hope you enjoyed this one. Like and subscribe if you're watching us. And comment. Do you love value? Do you love team value? Are we wrong to dismiss it? If so, why do you love it? Let us know.
Yeah, for the week-to-week stuff, check out TikTok as well.
Yeah, check us out on TikTok, AFPL, Tickety Talk.
Lovely. Cheers, Jack.
Cool. Cheers, Josh. In a biz.
Bye-bye.